Hey guys, welcome back to another Tech and Toys video. Today we're going to talk about the Sony a7III. I finally had it for about a week and I'm going to give you my thoughts on the other side of the intro. Thank you guys so much for checking out today's video. We're going to talk about the Sony a7III. First things first though, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I love it when you do that. Just click the little subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell next to it so that you're notified every time I upload a new video. Also, if you want to follow me across social media, it's at the Steve Freeman everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, just about everywhere. All right, let's dive right in. So for about 6 months, I had a huge camera dilemma. I just couldn't figure out which way to go. I looked at the Canon line and the rest of the Sony stuff. I even looked at a couple Red cameras. I looked at just about everything, and I bet I've logged 1 million hours on YouTube watching camera tutorials and seeing what everybody thought about all the different features and everything. And finally, I made the decision that I was going to buy the new Sony a7III. Now, everybody was saying, oh, don't get this camera in the beginning. Wait for the Sony a7S Mark III to come out, which they're expecting later in the year. So up front, everybody was like, just go ahead and skip this camera. But then when people started actually getting their hands on the Sony a7III, everybody's opinion started changing. And somewhere along the line, I don't know if it was somebody in Sony's marketing department or somewhere, but they made a grave mistake up front. They labeled this camera a great entry-level mirrorless camera. Now, the more videos that I watched, and then when I finally got my hands on it, which seemed like it took forever, everybody was sold out, they were back ordered, and you couldn't get it anywhere. So I kept watching all these videos, I was getting excited, but I couldn't buy the camera anywhere. And so I thought I was going to pre-order it, and then I ended up doing that, but then I was so far down on the pre-order list that when B&H finally got them in, they sold them all out again before I could get them. And then luckily I got a call from a local camera store here in Nashville called Dury's, and Ken said, hey, I've got you a Sony a7III. It's body only, which is what I really wanted. And I said, okay, I'm on my way to pick it up. So I was anxious to get my hands on it to find out, A, if it is an entry-level mirrorless camera, or if it lives up to the hype of what everybody else was talking about on YouTube and all these different camera reviews about it being just an absolute awesome camera. Now, I was anxious to step back up into the full frame. Before I went to Sony and I got the Sony a6500, which is a phenomenal camera, by the way. Absolutely phenomenal. If you're just getting started on YouTube or you want to make some great videos, you want to have the 4K ability, and you want the slow motion, you can do 1080p at 120 frames a second. Looks like butter. It's awesome. I can't recommend the Sony a6500, and it's what I've used for about the last 3 or 4 months with all my vlogs. Very happy with it. But I came from the Canon family and I had a Canon 5D Mark III. Now, that camera didn't have 4K, it didn't offer 4K, which is why I ended up going over to the Sony a6500. But what I did miss was the full frame. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the crop sensor. I've learned to work around it. But I missed the full frame. So when Sony announced the a7III, I was thinking, okay, this will be great, jump back up into a full frame camera, use it as my main vlogging camera. So I went over to Dury's and I picked this camera up. I also picked up a couple lenses to go with it. I got the Sony FE 28mm f2. I also picked up the Sony Zeiss 55mm 1.8, which is what I'm using right now. I actually have not gotten a chance to use the 28mm yet, but I'm going to when I do a more in-depth review on the camera, which is coming in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go out around Nashville and kind of do a cinematic vlog for you guys using the a7III, and we'll go into a lot more details about the features of the camera and why I love it so much. The video today I want to do is basically 1 week's use with the camera, working with it, navigating the menus, and a few of the things that I found just right off the bat that I absolutely love. And also the main reason why I think whoever called this an entry-level mirrorless camera should be taken out back. Stomped, hanged, whatever. Something should happen, because the a7 III is anything but an entry-level mirrorless camera. First of all, I want to talk about one of the main features that I love that Sony changed on this camera. Those of you that use Sony know that the previous placement of the record button was the dumbest placement for a record button on any camera ever. And it's so dumb, in fact, that I'm pretty sure that the same guy that came up with the a7 III as an entry-level mirrorless camera was the guy that decided where the record button goes on every other Sony Alpha camera. It's absolutely ridiculous. You can't feel if you're pushing it or not. It's up there on the right-hand corner. It's tough to get to, and it's frustrating. Now on the Sony a7 III, much like the A9 and some of the others, that record button is right on the back in the middle. It's easy to find. If you're vlogging, using these cameras for vlogging, you can reach around, you know right where it's at, and it's easy to push. So the placement of the record button, it's a big 2 thumbs up from me. The next thing I want to talk about is the battery life. I have used the a7 III now to shoot, I think, 3 or 4 different vlogs, and they've been anywhere from like 20 minutes. I think I did one that was 20 minutes, one that was almost an hour long on my weekly Music Biz vlogs that I upload on Tuesdays. I have yet to charge the camera yet, and it's still going right now. It is phenomenal. The bigger battery means longer lasting, which if you're coming from the smaller Alpha series cameras like the a6500, the a6300, you know the little batteries. It's like if you don't have 12 of them, you might as well not even go out. I swear they last 10 minutes apiece. I don't know what that was about. I think Sony needs to adjust that in their smaller cameras like the a6500, but in the a7 III, the battery life is absolutely phenomenal. The next thing I want to talk about is the barn door on the side. I love the fact that this camera has 2 SD card slots. Absolutely love that. Now, when I'm shooting vlogs like this, I don't actually use an internal memory card. I actually shoot to an Atomos Ninja Flame. The main reason for that is I love the monitor. The second reason for that is that I like to be able to shoot in 10-bit 422, and you cannot do that within the Sony cameras or even most of the Canon cameras and all that. So I love the 422 10-bit ProRes codec, and I'm able to use that by recording into the Atomos. So I don't actually use the card slots, but I can tell you that for run and gun shooting, I'm not going to want to mount the Atomos on top of the camera and do that. It's just too heavy, it's too much. So when I do that, I will be using the screen on the back of the Sony, which is of course a little bit bigger than what's on the a6500. Like I said, I'm going to get into the detailed specs in a future video where we really go over this camera in detail, just kind of doing a gloss over of my first week of use. Now, speaking of the barn door on one side that covers up your SD card slots, 2 of them, by the way. Thanks, Sony. The other side, here's one of the things I don't like about this camera. I wish they had put a single latchable barn door that covers up your mic connection, your HDMI connection, and some of the other connections for the camera. It actually uses the little flimsy pop-out things that they pop out, they get in the way. I'm seriously thinking about just ripping them off my camera because I don't ever need them shut. Now, I'm not going to take this camera out into bad weather or anything like that, so I'm not worried about water or dust. I actually keep the camera covered up. So I wish they had put the barn door that's on the other side of the camera on that side to protect those connections. I really do not like the little, you can't ever get them back in place, and they're hard to get, and they get in the way when you're trying to connect an HDMI cable or a mic cable. So I don't like that. Honest to God, after a week's worth of use, that's the only thing I do not like about this camera. I highly recommend getting the Sony a7 III. If you are like me and you have spent hours on YouTube researching different cameras, trying to find out what it is that you're going to buy, you've got a little bit of money and you want to invest in a new camera, I can't recommend the Sony a7 III enough. Enough, in fact, that I probably, when the a7S III comes out, I probably won't even bother. This camera is phenomenal in low light. I'll get into that further in another review. I also don't get the fact that a lot of these guys do extremely high ISO tests. I can't imagine in a real world application why I would need to use 64,000 ISO. The footage would be completely useless, so I don't even care. My main thing is I shoot an S-Log3, so I want to know that this camera is great for low light in denominations of the native ISO for S-Log3, which is 800. That's the lowest ISO that you can go and shoot in S-Log3. So I want to know that it looks great in 800, 1600, 2400, and in denominations of that. Now, I do have to say that I did pump the ISO on this camera up the other day pretty high, and it was still very clean. So that's something I'm very happy with. So in this camera, in the Sony a7III, you've got a full frame sensor, which to me is the best sensor that Sony has put in a camera yet. It absolutely is beautiful. You get the detail all the way out to the edges. It's absolutely phenomenal. The autofocus I have found is a lot better than the a6500. The menu system is pretty much the same. I hear a lot of people talk about how frustrating the Sony menu system is. It was to me when I first got the a6500, but now that I've learned it, it feels native to me in navigating through the a7III menu. I love the fact that it's full frame, which allows me now to step up into full frame lenses like the 55mm Zeiss 1.8 as well as the 28mm f2, which I can't wait to actually get on the camera and use a little bit. And like I said, I'm going to do a cinematic vlog in a couple weeks where we're going to use all the new lenses. Now, the one thing that I love about this camera that not a lot of people talk about is if you are a member of the Sony family and you are a diehard Sony camera user and you have come up from the a6000 to the a6300 to the a6500 and you've bought all these lenses. The thing about the a7III is it shoots in crop mode. So now I can put it in quickly with one touch of a button. I can put it in crop mode and I can use all of my lenses that I use on the a6500, like my Sony 10 to 18 and my Sigma 30mm 1.4. It almost seems like it's the perfect camera. And I know there are a lot of people out there that are Canon people, and I don't have anything against Canon. I don't have anything against Panasonic's and the GH line. I think all these cameras are great. What they've enabled us to do is go out and shoot cinema quality footage with any of these cameras on a moderate budget. Now, the Sony a7III comes in body only at like $1,998, which is phenomenal. I can't believe that this camera actually costs less than $2,000. If you are in the market for a mirrorless camera or a DSLR and you're shopping around and you've got a little bit of a budget, if you're not quite to $2,000, let me tell you this, save your money and buy the a7III. Don't just rush out and buy something that is within your budget range. I'm telling you, if you just save your money, put it together a little bit, and you go pick up the a7III, you will be so happy that you did instead of buying something that's a little bit less expensive but doesn't have nearly the capability that the Sony a7III does. So guys, just to wrap up, I just wanted to do a quick little video and share with you my experience with my first week of owning the Sony a7III. And so far, it's thumbs up, toes up, everything else that you can put up in the air. It is a clear winner. I absolutely love this camera. And I got to tell you, I was going to buy the Sony FS7 or maybe the FS5. And then I ended up saving $6,000 and buying this camera, and I am so glad that I did. If you do shoot with an external monitor, you don't have to worry about the time limit on the camera. So that's something that I found. I always use the Atomos, so I'm not really worried about that. If I am using the internal dual memory cards, I'm not going to be shooting for longer than 30 minutes at a time. Anything over 30 minutes is going to be in this sort of setting where I am using the Atomos Ninja Flame and recording externally to it. So other than the doors on the side that cover up some of the connections, I have yet to find a negative about this camera. So I highly encourage you, if you're in the market, check out the Sony a7III. They did everything right with this camera, or at least 99.9%. Sony, can we work on maybe the next version, or maybe the Sony a7III Mark II? Maybe just put one of the other kind of barn door style opening and closing little latches on the other side. That would be really great. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something out of it. Like I said, a more in-depth video on the Sony a7 III is going to be coming in a couple weeks. I'm going to take it out around town. We're going to test out the slow motion. It's going to be kind of a cinematic vlog. I might take some of my sports cars out and get some fun footage like that and do some things like that as well. Look for that video coming in a couple of weeks. If you haven't already, guys, please subscribe to the channel, hit the subscription button, then hit the bell next to it so that you're notified every time I upload a new video. If you want to follow me across social media, it's at the Steve Freeman on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. Also want to remind you, we are going to start doing a live broadcast on Wednesday nights. That's going to start in a couple of weeks. I'll keep you a little bit better informed on that. Check my social media to stay updated on that. And on that live stream, we're going to talk about anything you guys want to talk about. We can talk about music business, songwriting, producing. We can talk about gear, cameras, gaming, lighting. We can talk about anything you want to talk about. Just looking forward to hanging out with you guys. Until next time, keep being creative. See you next week.